This, our concluding formal session of today's wonderful event, is all about looking forward, and its title clearly conveys that. It says, the next 30 years, and Lisa's already planning the 60th anniversary event, even as she is here on the panel. My job today in this is to ask our panelists questions and then to give you in the audience a chance to ask some questions. First, I'm going to introduce our panelists, not in the order in which they yes, actually, in the order in which they were sitting, just coincidentally, I suppose. Marie Donoghue, Columbia College 87, Columbia Law 91, is the Executive Vice President, Global Business and Content Strategy for ESPN. Since joining ESPN in 1998, she has also overseen the ESPN Films Unit, as well as some of the network's most popular studio programs. Donoghue has been recognized by The Hollywood Reporter as one of the, quote, Power 100 Women in Entertainment, unquote, and has received similar distinctions from Variety, Advertising Age, and many more. Previously, she produced ESPN Internet products at Starway Ventures, was an associate for Winthrop, Stimson, Putnam, and Roberts, that's always hard to say, and was Senior Director of Legal Affairs for Polygram Holdings, the parent company of some of the world's leading record companies. Marie is a New York City native and a current resident. To her right, Virginia Cornish, Columbia College, 1991, the Helena Rubinstein Professor of Chemistry. She received her bachelor's degree at chemistry working with Ronald Breslow, who just happens to be the person who wrote the report that recommended that the university become coeducational. She received her PhD at UC Berkeley and did postdoctoral experience at MIT, after which she joined our chemistry department in 1999. She is the first Columbia College alumna to become a tenured professor at Columbia. Her lab brings together modern methods in synthetic chemistry and DNA technology to expand the synthetic capabilities of living cells. Her research is currently supported by the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation and has resulted in a very large number of publications, as well as several awards and patents. To her right and my left, Lisa Carnoy, Columbia College 89, who is the Northeast Division Executive for U.S. Trust, the private bank within Bank of America, Market President for Bank of America in New York City, and sits on the Global Wealth and Investment Management Leadership Team, as well as Bank of America's Operating Committee. She has a bachelor's degree from the college and an MBA from Harvard. She is a Columbia University trustee. Not only is she a Columbia University trustee, she is the very first Columbia College alumna to be a university trustee. She was also on, and still is on, the Columbia College Board of Visitors as an emeritus member, is a co-chair of something very important in my life, the college's Core to Commencement campaign. She's a co-founder of the Women's Leadership Council for Athletics, and many, many more. She was presented the University Alumni Medal in 2000, the John Jay Award for Distinguished Professional Achievement in 2007, and in 2015, she joined the board of United Way of New York, which happens to have as its director a Columbia College alum, Sheena Wright. Marie, and I'm supposed to give, according to Bernice's instructions, a fun fact about each of our panelists. You know, they say the way to success in life is to hire people smarter than you are and listen to them. I've done that. Marie's fun fact, I'm told, is she rode on the first women's crew team, which I also heard may have run into a dead body in the river in practice one day. Virginia sang in the Columbia Gospel Choir, whose director was, take a guess, Wanda Holland Green. Lisa, at Columbia College, was appointed the Vice President of SWAG. I guess that's preparation for being a trustee. Vice President of SWAG of the senior class, and in that role she ordered hats, sweatshirt, beer mugs, and Frisbees, which I just discovered this week we're still paying for. So, Anyway, I am delighted to be sitting here with this distinguished group of panelists, and without further humor, I'm going to get right into a set of questions that we've prepared to propel this discussion. Each of you was a student in the early years of coeducation at Columbia. Would you share with us how that experience impacted your thinking and perspectives in the choice of your profession? Did you have a sense of the extent to which the field you were entering was male-dominated, and did that influence in any way your choice? Marie.
Well, I'll start off with an embarrassing admission. I was actually in the first year of women at Columbia, and I didn't really focus on that, or I'm not sure I realized that before I got here. I did realize it when I got here. I think with me, it actually led me not to focus on being a minority or outnumbered, whether it be, I was on Wall Street, I was in the internet, I'm now in the sports business. And at Columbia, every year we had a few more women come in, which was great, but we were always outnumbered. I was explaining to my co-panelists downstairs, we were the first year of women's crew, and we had to practice at 5 a.m. because the men had to practice at the reasonable times. I actually am incredibly thankful for my time at Columbia because it's led to me to feel pretty comfortable and confident and just get after it. My entire career I've been outnumbered by men, and we'll get into a bunch of that later. But I think starting at Columbia really gave me the confidence and told me not to focus on that, focus on what I can control.
Thank you. Virginia?
So as Jim already alluded to, I had the really good fortune to have Ron Breslow as my mentor, who really is one of the things he's known for is his track record of training women. So for me, as an undergraduate, it was really not on my mind whether I was a woman or a man. I feel like the professors in the chemistry department, identified me as somebody who really was meant to do chemistry, and they did everything in their power to help me be successful, and I think I'm just grateful for that. And in retrospect, I guess it is very important who you choose as your mentors.
Lisa?
Sure. So I didn't know what I wanted to do while I was at Columbia. In fact, I had never heard of investment banking until my senior year. But I did know I was interested in business, and I went to many presentations in this room that spanned consulting to advertising, fellowships. And it was really a process of elimination where I chose finance because I thought it was very substantive and it would expose me broadly to business. The interesting part of that is I hadn't taken any econ or math or finance, but I knew it couldn't be harder than Nietzsche or Kant. And 30 years later, I can attest to that. I would say I wasn't focused on the lack of women, but one of the things that did appeal to me as I continued my career in finance was that my success could be measured in a very quantifiable way. And so whether it was revenues or market share or deals that I won, I felt that there was an element of fairness in how I could be evaluated. I'm not sure I felt that at every moment of my career, but that was something that was appealing to me.
Thank you all. So the second question, tell us about times in your career where being a woman might have been difficult and how you overcame the hurdles, or conversely, times when you felt like being the only woman in the room was an actual advantage. How do you decide whether to play the game or stick to your authentic self to change the system? Let's start with Lisa.
Well, I don't know if we want to share stories from the trading floor in the late 80s and early 90s. But safe to say that I was in environments where there were very, very few women. In fact, in my second year after Columbia, I was at a firm where there were 5 women, professional women within the investment bank out of 120 professionals, and we all sat in a row, and it was called the Pink Ghetto. And the partner's bathroom was a men's room, which is really all you needed to know about your likelihood of making partner at that firm. But I did find the work quite exhilarating. And interestingly, over the course of my career, on balance, I think with clients, it has helped to be a woman. And particularly when I was young and going out to originate business, my sense is that clients gave me the benefit of the doubt. They thought, well, she's so young and she's a woman and Merrill Lynch sent her here. She must be really smart. And so maybe they listened a little more, or they remembered me, certainly if I was the only woman they were meeting that day. And I also think it's just healthier to think that on balance it's a net positive. In terms of helping other people, as I've become more senior, I certainly can be an advocate to make sure we hire, develop, retain, and recognize women. And it's certainly one of the things that I view as a key part of what I do professionally and something that is enormously rewarding.
Thank you. Virginia?
So as an academic, when I think about the notion of being authentic, I probably think of somebody like Virginia Woolf and the notion of having a room of your own. And so I guess I feel very grateful and privileged that this institution, in essence, gives me a room of my own, which allows me, to pursue, my ideas and ways I'd like to see those happen in the world. I think that as I get older and I think about being authentic, I guess what I realize is that I can't really be authentic so long as the world around me is not authentic. And I think what is very much on my mind at this point in my career is what would it take to give, the broader community, to give everybody the ability to have a room of their own and be authentic. And we might think about that in practical terms, something like the UN Millennium Goals, or we might think that in more personal terms. And if I, think about the extremely talented and high energy women I know at Columbia, I think if I had a wish, for what we would do, I think that, as women, we're really in a unique position to work on giving that authenticity to the broader society. And I think it would be really amazing, when Lisa holds our 60th event, if we can see progress there too. Yeah.
Thank you, Virginia. Marie?
Similar to what Lisa said, I do think it's quite a double-edged sword. I do feel like women, at least in the fields I've been in, sometimes women earlier in their career actually have a bit of an advantage. Some of that may be there are more women at the lower levels because we enter and maybe find reasons to leave later. But at the law firm, they always thought women were more detail-oriented and better behaved at the summer cocktail parties and all sorts of things. And I actually think when you're junior, and if you're in a male-dominated field, so much of being a young employee is getting notice or a spotlight or an opportunity. And I do feel like as a woman in sports particularly, you're usually the only one in the room. So you do have a spotlight, and you can make what you will out of that. And so there's a lot of pressure sometimes, but it's a great opportunity. I also came up through the internet, and I was an internet person at a TV company for a long time, and it was very similar in that you were given the spotlight because, what the heck does she know about TV? And I was put in much more senior meetings because they needed to understand the internet. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that attention and focus. It does get harder, I feel, as you get more senior. I think the politics and the soft skills and the, not the soft skills, but the old boys network does come into play quite a bit as you get more senior if you're not careful. But that's why I actually embrace being a woman even more as I've matured in my career, because I see it and I like being authentic and using my influence both for my colleagues as well as for junior women coming up.
Thank you. Our next question. What are things you see that need to happen to create access for more women to reach the top levels of leadership in any business or industry, but especially those that have been traditionally the domain of men? Virginia, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, so the question is about, I think we're sort of all day today talking around, there's sort of a first phase of success where we do things like make Columbia co-ed, and we are able to achieve certain numbers. And then there's this second phase of success. And we all know that we don't have that second phase, but maybe we're not quite even sure what that would look like or what it would be. And I think my thinking on this topic is really influenced by a book that was referred to this morning, Where Do We Go From Here, which was both a speech and a book by Martin Luther King Jr. And he talks about, again, this notion that to really have what we're hoping for as women, that's going to really require us to create those kind of opportunities for everybody. And I believe it's really only once we create those opportunities for everybody that we can really have what we're truly after.
Okay, Marie.
I'm not normally a bomb thrower, but I as I've gotten older, and I think we have to blow up some legacies, and I don't think we should be subtle about it. I'll give you a few examples. In my career, we started the ESPN Films group. We had blown up a previous group that did a lot of scripted entertainment and created a documentary film division, and we created 20 heads, and I put a young guy in charge of it. And I told him, hire the best 20 people. And we got so much pressure to hire people who've been around a long time and people who knew people at the company. And we held really firm. And shockingly, he ended up with over half women on that team. 30 for 30 was produced and run by a team that's always been over half women. They won an Oscar in March, which was crazy and amazing, or late February. And we did something similar. We have a lack of minority journalists in the sports field, and it's been a real focus at ESPN, and it's a hard nut to crack. So we started a website called The Undefeated to cover sports, race, and culture. And it's primarily an African-American team, but shockingly it's over half women because we hired based on skill. We didn't hire based on legacy. And I can tell you, we could hire 2 to 3 staffs of The Undefeated if they give us the head. So it's not that hard to find people and to encourage and support people who aren't given the opportunity, but we've got to blow up some legacies. And legacy is who you go to lunch with, who you know in your social circles. People have to widen them, and I would literally create, express opportunities for more diversity in the workplace and in everything.
Thank you. How do you feel the game changes at the top levels of leadership once more women have seats at the table? How is that good for the companies and for society at large? Lisa?
Well, it's definitely more fun. Seriously, I mean, I have been in the finance industry for more than 25 years, and I've loved my work and my colleagues and my clients, but at times it can feel lonely. And so having more senior women is definitely good personally, and it's also good for business. We heard about it earlier in the day, but this idea of diversity of ideas and different voices at the table, not just by gender, by background, ethnicity, race, you name it. And we even see that here on the Board of Trustees. I mean, I was beyond honored to be asked to be a trustee, and in the last half a dozen years, we now have 4 Columbia College women among a very small group of trustees. There's only 24 trustees of this university, including the president, and we have 16 schools. So I think our representation is moving along quite well, and we're not done yet. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that President Bollinger has really been a leader in this regard, and it is not by chance that half of our deans are women. There was very specific efforts, analysis, investment, cultivation of talent, recruiting. And one of the neat things for those of you who don't know is you might expect a woman to be a dean in a school in areas like social work and nursing, but you might not expect a woman to be a dean of the School of Engineering or Architecture or law or SEPA, et cetera. And I think there could be a time where we could run the table and all the deans potentially could be women. So,
Wow.
But that was certainly by intent and hard work. And one of the ways we're going to make continued change is to have the women help bringing others up, and not just women, but others more broadly, and to have leadership and institutions do things in a very deliberate and intentional way.
Marie?
Well, I think all the data shows the more diverse teams create better value. There's an awful lot of data about public companies that show that. But I would also say on a personal level, when you're not the only woman in the room, you could actually embrace being a woman. I'm the second woman on the executive committee at ESPN, and it's been an incredible blessing because I don't have to worry about being the woman because there are two of us. And I think I would embrace it and feel my influence and be able to make more change if we had 4 or 5 women. And that's one thing I always tell folks. And don't compete. There's not just the worst thing. One of the worst things, and people make such a big deal over having a woman in the room. That's not a great thing. We need more women in the room. If there's just one, it's not much progress.
Virginia?
I think it absolutely matters, who's in positions of leadership. I can give, 2 practical examples. So I had the opportunity for several years to chair admissions of PhD students in the chemistry department, and I brought us from basically 0% to 11% of the entering PhD class were students of color. So there are very tangible things that you can do. And then I think I can also say, for me on the other side, as a woman on the faculty at Columbia, it means a great deal to me that you have, women in positions of leadership, like on the board of trustees, and also seeing, women leaders here with CCW. It makes me feel stronger and empowered in my own work. So I think it absolutely matters.
So talk about a pivotal moment when you realized that you had arrived in a position of leadership and hence had the ability to create change within your organization. How do you think about women's equality at top levels of leadership? Do women need to act like men, or are there different models of leadership? Virginia, let's start with you.
So I think in terms of being a leader, you have to be yourself. That's, really, the only thing that you have at your disposal. I think the other thing I would mention on this topic is that what was interesting to me as an undergraduate, as a PhD student, it was a non-issue that I was a woman. But what I found is that as I raised in my career and I moved to the top levels, this is when it really became a dogfight, and this is when I have the best stories to tell. And so I think that's a really interesting topic that I'm still, negotiating. And I think, one of the things that's helping me the most with that is other women in leadership positions and having them back me up or help me strategize. But I think that's something we're going to have to deal with. We're going to get to these women to these top positions, but then what do they need to be empowered?
Thank you. Lisa?
Sure. So I want to break it into 2 categories. First, more generally, and then specifically how I have felt powerful around women. So where I felt the most power is when I've taken tremendous risk. And it could be declaring in a boardroom to a client, I'm your gal, and I've won a piece of business based on my conviction and my ability to convince that client that I could do a better job than someone else they might consider working with. It could be in the case of where I see a new business opportunity, like 3 years ago when I said that green bonds would be a $50 billion asset class within a few years, and at that point it was just a few billion, and I wasn't even basing it on any real analysis. It was just my judgment that it was important and big, and we needed to collectively get behind it for many, many reasons. Or it could be around making a personal decision around my career. And so those are areas where I took risk, and out of that risk felt powerful. But as it relates to women, there's some very different things. So there was a time when I was on the MD committee and someone was not on the MD committee. A woman was not promoted, but at the leadership table, our boss said, who did we miss? And I identified a woman that I said she should have been promoted, and she wasn't for whatever reason, and I advocated for her, and she was promoted. And I have to say, I've never felt more powerful than that. And 2 other examples were when I was running the capital markets division, we happened to have 2 up-and-coming women that were both pregnant and were planning to breastfeed. And I took the guest bathroom and I turned it into the breastfeeding area. And it was something that I could do easily. It was sort of a costless decision, but the statement it made that this was important and the room would be available, and it would be available not just to these 2 women, but for women in perpetuity, was something I was really proud of and felt powerful. And then finally, a very powerful moment was when, as head of capital markets, where I paid about 800 people globally, the top 3 paid people were women. That felt powerful.
Very good. Marie?
So I think the moment I realized it actually wasn't so much about me personally as much as how much I think I represented to other people. So I said earlier I was the second woman on the executive committee at ESPN, and it kind of was a great moment, but it was a logical progression in my career. But where I felt powerful were all the women who reached out to me and said how meaningful that was. Almost as many internet people reached out to me because I was the first internet executive on the committee too. And so, you know, if you can't believe you can be it if you can't see it. So I think that, for me, really hit home that it's not so, it was nothing personal for me. It was just really important that we surround ourselves by representations that we want to eventually have be reality. It's interesting. I don't think we have to become more like men in any way. You should be who you are. But I will tell you, guys are different. They get upset when they get interrupted. We should get upset when we get interrupted. That's got nothing to do with being a man or a woman. I had a funny experience. Many of you probably have had the same experience Ruth Bader Ginsburg and most women have had, which is you say something in a room and no one reacts. And then a guy says it, and they're like, oh, my God, that's brilliant. And I was sitting next to a good friend of mine at a big meeting, all men except for me, and he said something, and he used kind of technical language, and no one reacted. And then someone sitting next to him said basically the same thing, slightly less technical language. And my friend sitting next to me literally could not control himself. He said to me, I just said that. And he couldn't even whisper it. And so, I don't think we should be like men, but I think we should stick up for ourselves a bit more.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to stick up for the future, I guess, in this next question. I'll have you start. As you look out 30 years from now, when we'll celebrate our 60th anniversary, how do you think finance, media, and science will change with more women applying pressure at the top levels? What do you think has to change over this time to elevate more women to those levels?
Look, I have great faith in women. That's not my worry. I think we will be fine. We will do great. I think to actually make real change, we've got to get some of these guys on board. If you're a senior male executive, why aren't you mentoring young women? I tell young women all the time, because they always want a female mentor, and I love to mentor, and I mentor many more women than men, and it's a love of my life that I do it. But, young women, you see who's in power, go get some mentors, walk into his office. And so I think we have to get men to step up, and I think as we as women get more senior, we have to put pressure on them. I'm in plenty of rooms where they talk about the high performers. If you're in that room, I feel it's my obligation to step up and talk about the folks they're maybe not mentioning. Or if they're complaining about a young woman who didn't do well in a meeting because she's under a spotlight, how about the mediocre guy who's not under the same spotlight but said even dumber things? So anyway.
Feeling like the mediocre guy who's not under the spotlight right now, let me turn to my friendly colleague in chemistry and ask Virginia to comment on this, answer this too.
So I just want to say that I'm so excited that Columbia College is co-ed, and I really believe that the women, who graduate from Columbia, the women in this room, I believe that they can do something that the men before them couldn't do, because we've experienced, what it is to be treated badly, basically. And like I said before, I don't think you're going to take this problem on by just taking it on with women. This is basically about treating every single person with love, respect, and dignity. And I think as women, we're raised, or I don't know, we think that way more. And I think, at our 60th event, if we could have really made, inroads on making sure everybody has a room of their own and can live a life that they're, proud of, I think that this will basically take care of what's on our mind for women, that they go hand in hand, that one really can't be solved without the other. So I think, for women, that's just like a super exciting challenge for us, and I'm really excited to see what women are going to do.
Thank you. Lisa?
Well, I'm very optimistic as well, and I look around this room, and there are so many remarkable women that are already changing history, which we've done collectively, and changing the future. And even just the few current students and recent grads that I heard from through the course of this day, I mean, there's a lot of power and brilliance and compassion and esprit de corps in this room, and that can only make you feel very, very optimistic. And I think there's no question that when we're sitting here 30 years from now, and it doesn't need to be 30 years from now, hopefully we do it much more frequently, but there will be women not only leading the charge in the industries that we're talking about here, media, sports, science, banking, but are going to be reinventing new industries and new ways of connecting the world and being good citizens and driving businesses and creating opportunity. So I can't even imagine the ways they're going to do it, but I am quite confident that many of the women in this room will be leading the charge.
So I think that's a prediction that certainly will come true. Our final question. What should Columbia be doing for women students and former students to help break through barriers, the proverbial glass ceilings? Lisa?
Well, all of you should visit the Cornish lab because it is really cool. And there's actually even more than just visiting a lab with an unbelievably diverse group of young and accomplished scientists, and to see the kind of teamwork and cutting edge work that's being done there. But one of the reasons that Virginia and I became such good friends, and frankly relatively recently, is that I love getting to know kick-ass Columbia women in all different kinds of spheres of influence. And across this room, there are women that are doing all kinds of interesting things in public service and in education and in business and in academia and on and on and on. And I think one of the goals for all of you is, if you haven't yet met the person to your left or the person to your right, that when we're having a drink after, to make sure that you also make that connection. Because having grown up in finance, where it was a little lonely at times to be a senior woman, I really looked to folks like Eliza and Wanda and Virginia and others to also be my, what I call my personal board of directors and my friends, but we cheer each other on, we kick each other in the pants, we tell each other to go for it, we give each other the brutal truth. And having women like the women in this room has been a godsend for me.
Okay, great. Virginia?
I'll just, echo what Lisa's saying. I think the single most important thing Columbia does for me as a former student and now on the faculty is the amazing women that it puts in leadership positions. I probably don't have to tell you how much Lisa and Wanda and Sherry and Suzanne and other women leaders here at Columbia, I mean, you guys mean just, so much to me, and I'm so appreciative, and I think the best thing Columbia can do is to, keep getting women of these caliber and, make them the leaders of Columbia College and the university.
Okay. Marie?
I think it's similar to what happens when you get out of Columbia. I think to get ahead, you really need support that both mentors and supports you, but you also need to be championed. If I feel like Columbia has absolutely mentors young women who come here. I'd love to see, and I think you're doing it already, but the championing is something that I think we forget. I think Columbia does a great job of it, but I think as we get out in the real world, people forget that you need champions. Championing people is hard, because I can mentor anybody, but to champion someone is to go into a room and say, take her. I vouch for her. And I think we need a lot more of that everywhere. And I think Columbia's doing a great job and should continue to do even more.
Fantastic. So now we're going to open this to questions from what Lisa calls kick-ass Columbia women. Am I allowed to say that as a dean? Anyway, yes, I've been told by the trustees are my bosses, so I've been told by a trustee it's okay. So anyway, questions, and we have a microphone.
We have a microphone.
Yes, thank you, Avia. Okay. Hi there, Katie. Don't ask about a linguistics department, okay?
No, I'm going to ask a bit bigger than that. So I wanted to ask, because today we've talked a lot about representation of women in different boards, leadership positions. We've talked about the percentage of women being the one woman in the room, or being a room that's half women, and that being an exciting thing. And I was thinking about this really being phase one after coeducation, and whether anyone else spends a lot of time thinking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg saying that enough women on the Supreme Court will be 9, because we've never thought, why are there 9 men and no women? So why would someone think twice about there being 9 women? So I was wondering if, rather than thinking about being the woman in a room advocating for the other women, whether we ever think about the goal being the people in the room, and because they happen to be the 9 most qualified scientists at Columbia, they happen to all be women.
One of you like to take a...
I was wondering if that could be phase 2.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I believe if you actually have the most qualified people in the room, it could be. It could be 9 women. I think we have a ways to go to have people understand that. I also, there's another thing I get involved in a lot of the diversity efforts at our company and our industry, and I feel like we bring people in for their differences, and then we beat it out of them. So I think I'm not speaking for my company in particular there, but I think I think we should embrace our differences and it's like we did in the films group. It's like we did at the Undefeated. If you hire the most qualified people, you'll be shocked at well, you shouldn't be, but some people will be shocked at the array of people who are in that room.
Either of you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, and maybe you're not a gambler, I am, but when I meant run the table, that means, it's a craps term, but basically it meant that all the deans, I could see all the deans here being women, and I don't think Columbia College would ever be all women, nor should it be, but I think in terms of different businesses, I think if what you're saying, should we all start businesses with other women? I'm interested, if you've got a good idea, but we probably will see more of that, where folks say, listen, I don't want to work in this environment, so I'm going to make my own environment. And you see a disproportionate percentage of entrepreneurship by women who probably say, I want to define the kind of business I want, the kind of environment, the kind of lifestyle, work-life integration, and so that's quite a provocative idea.
Other questions? Over here. Oh, where's the mic? Right here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Laurel Daniels Abrazizi, 91, proud classmate of Virginia. And I actually, as a professor here at Columbia up at the medical school, sought out Virginia as a role model, and I'm really proud to have you here on this panel. And I think many of us came to this event in order to be inspired and empowered and to get that from you guys, so thank you. But I love the idea of throwing the bomb at the legacy. I think we can mentor, we can champion, but there is a reality that old boy network is there and strong, and if people aren't being very intentional in terms of their outreach of their network, of the people that they know and what they know about other people, I'm proud of 4 women on the board of trustees, but 4 out of 24.
So it's not 4 to 24,
No.
Columbia
College
College women.
women.
There are
Okay.
other women from the business school, the School of the Arts,
Okay, great.
journalism.
I'm so glad to hear that. I don't know that, but I've been on other boards of trustees where they do feel very excited about their representation, and still it's not equal to men. Right. So be very proud of our success as Columbia College women and where we've come, but not to rest on the laurels of what we're appreciating. That we really we have to be intentional in terms of the outreach and continued bringing people up. And just thank you for being role models. And another thing, I make it an intent to come to events. I remember from being in 91, watching the parade of alums being all men. And so even if I can only hop on the subway and be here for 20 minutes, and I can walk in that parade just so that there are more women, people of color in that parade, I do it just to be there. And I said that to someone last year. I was talking to Dr. Valentini, but I said that's part of why I'm here. I can't stay for the the presentation because I have to be back uptown, but part of it is to be seen by the undergrads. And as I walked in the parade last year, I remember some people in the audience saying, "Oh, finally some women." Like, when it got up to the 80s and 90s, like, that's the first time women were in the parade. So don't take that for granted. Like, it's great to come out for this huge celebration, but come out for the little things, too. Come out for just the smaller alumni events and be present and meet all the men and let them know how wonderful you are, too.
Okay. Question in the via in the back.
Thank you. Rhonda Moore, class of 96. Hello. Hello. So it was mentioned on the panel earlier that as you go up higher in the work world, the politics thicken. And I'd like to ask you, what tactics have you used to survive and overcome challenges as it gets more and more political? So far, my tactic has been to network a lot outside the organization where I'm currently placed and then land softly elsewhere. But one shouldn't have to leave every time you want to move up. So what tactics have you used and found successful in dealing with the boys club and the politics? Thanks.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but I actually have found female colleagues in the industry. Leslie Giddis, who was the killer moderator of the last panel, is one who's been a great ally, and we always find each other at every event because there are about 5 of us. I'm just teasing, we're getting more numbers. But I have actually found that women in the industry have been incredibly helpful to me. I'll also tell you that there are, not all men are badly intentioned. A lot of them would love to help. And you know who they are pretty quickly. When Leslie and I walk into a cocktail party with 40 men, there are the few who come up, and they're not all nice to each other, so I don't need special treatment, but they're the ones who'll come up and make us feel at home and welcome. We often hypothesize they're the ones who have strong mothers and strong wives. But I feel you can get your confidence, you can get advice, you can actually talk more freely sometimes with people outside your own company. And I'll tell you, when you have good contacts outside your company, it's noticed at your company, because that you are an asset for your company, and the more better connected you are outside your company, the more important asset you are, the more at risk you are to leave. So don't do what you can do within your company, but do not neglect outside.
Cool.
I just want to tell you, like, fight. You know what I'm saying? Just fight. I think we have to remember too that for the men, it's also a dogfight as they're getting to the highest levels. So it's not like it's unique, I think, to not being a man. So I think, you have to fight, and I think that's the biggest thing I would want to say to you is, I believe in you, and I want you to believe in you, and I want you to fight and go get it so that you can then help the next person, fight the fight.
So I don't know if this was embedded in your question, but one of the best pieces of advice I got from a wonderful boss many years ago was don't assume your boss can read your mind, because I thought he could. And even my husband can't, and he's wonderful. But if it's something that's important to you, whether it's a next promotion or an office with a view or being part of a training program or something else that's going on in your life, you need to let her or him know. And I will tell you that every significant leadership promotion I've received over the last, I guess now 13, 14 years, I've asked for, every single one. And I haven't asked for it always in the same way. The first one, it was, I think I can be helpful during a time of transition and upheaval in a group. And other times it was an explicit job opening and I raised my hand and said, I'm your gal. But every single time, without fail, I've asked for it. And doesn't mean I've gotten every job I've asked for, but if you don't ask, again, they can't read your mind.
Yeah. Anyway, other question? Here. Where's the via? So, right here.
We have Monica on that side. I'll be on this side.
Okay, good. That's good.
Hi, so a lot of people today have talked about mentoring, and Marie, you talked about championing, and I know there are a lot of women in this room who have worked very hard to have mentoring programs for Columbia College women. But I'm the mother of a daughter who's decided to go to Wellesley. because, in large part, because culturally, once you're a Wellesley woman, you're always a Wellesley woman. And the women who reached out to her as a prospective student was very powerful to her. So I'm wondering, what do we need to do so that we don't have mentoring programs, but we have mentoring culture? So that once you're a Columbia College woman, like, that's a lifelong obligation to every other Columbia College woman.
Okay, well, first of all, I think the Columbia College Women Mentoring Program has been a enduring and powerful mentorship program. In fact, I have mentees that I've had a relationship that spans 2 decades. In fact, I stopped taking on new ones because I didn't ever shake the old ones out of choice. But I think that's a cultural shift, and I think you've just declared. So as of today, off we go. Yeah.
Okay. Done.
But how does that happen institutionally, right? So, like, we all walk out of the door and we want it to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to make that happen.
Well, we're going to now let you know the 10 people that get in next year that you're going to welcome to the Columbia College Women family. Once you
Yeah.
give us your email.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Question over. Microphone over here. Question over here.
Hi, I'm Christine Sidemba, class of 2015. I was wondering if you could each share some of your most challenging or lowest points in your careers, and how you sort of overcame that, what you told yourself mentally and emotionally to kind of keep going and get to the successful points you've gotten to today.
So definitely one of the hardest periods for me, which makes sense in academics, was when I came up for tenure. And so the way that ended up happening for me is that another institution, the University of Michigan, approached me, and they ended up making me an offer to move there with tenure. This meant that I ended up coming up for tenure a year early, which meant that I had my first child, Chloe, who's sitting here in the audience. Basically, I had her the year before I was going to have to put my tenure package in. So then I had to travel around the country giving my tenure talks. I brought Chloe with me. Bonnie Rosenberg, who's sitting next to Chloe, went on some of those trips with me. At Harvard, they really didn't know what to call those scheduled breaks on my schedule. Everybody kept asking me all day why I had all these, breaks during my interviews during the day. Columbia is a little slower than other institutions, in part because it has a very rigorous review process for tenure. And so I ended up having to turn down the offer from Michigan before Columbia had reached their decision about tenure. And this affected my science, and it affected my family, and it was super stressful. I think the positive thing is the more things like that you go through, you really don't care. Like, it's really hard. It is really hard by now to get my attention and make me shake. I do have to tell you that Jim Valentini was always a particularly wonderful support to me as a woman in chemistry, and maybe we can all just acknowledge, Jim, we all do know how much you care about women at Columbia.
Thank you, Virginia.
I've certainly had many disappointments. One, 8 months after graduating Columbia, the firm that I decided to join went bankrupt. And not only was I devastated because I quite liked what I was doing and I wanted to be employed, but I felt like an idiot because I had chosen that firm over several other opportunities. Most of those other firms who at that point would not talk to me because I had turned them down as a 21 or 22-year-old, 9 months prior. But that was a very valuable lesson in, one, you got to, dust off your boots and go find another job. Two, that in the financial services industry, these companies can be quite fragile, and your number may come up and you can't take it personally. I didn't cause the firm to go bankrupt, but here I was, just a few months out of school looking for a job. And it did enable me to have more resiliency later, where unfortunately I had to endure many other periods of upheaval, because it's an industry that subsequently endured, the internet bubble and the Asian contagion and the Russian flu and 9/11, and of course the crises of all crises in 2008. And at that point, the added complexity of not knowing whether my firm at the time would endure was that I led a very large group, so I was responsible for hundreds of people, and I was also pregnant with twins. And so the period of 2008 and going through that, while it was absolutely beyond stressful, in some ways it made me a much better manager and perhaps a better mother too, in that the level of empathy that I had for everyone going through that and what it meant for thousands and thousands of colleagues and their families and their communities. And frankly, personally not knowing I had a job for 91 days between the announcement of a merger and being selected in December of '08 was something that was just devastating, but really taught me a lot. And as a leader, I had to convey some level of optimism in the great long term, even knowing that many, many people on my team would not have a role going forward. So very difficult to navigate.
I have a quick one, which sounds like everybody's worst nightmare, but it actually turned out okay. A few years ago, I was presenting to the Walt Disney Company Board of Directors, and I was told I was the first woman from ESPN ever to do that, and I was a nervous wreck, and I turned and I said, let's go to Wimbledon Live. We had launched an Apple TV app, and I said, let's go to Wimbledon Live and see the 9 courts. And all of a sudden I heard, and I looked up, I took a deep breath, and I said to the AV guy in the back, I said, everything okay? And he said, the projector blew. It's going to be a few minutes. I'll let you know when we're ready. And so I took a deep breath, which I recommend highly. And a member of the board of directors, a woman actually, said, without missing a beat, said, well, Marie, while we have a few minutes, what do you think about? And it wasn't really a hard question. Number one, you'll survive anything, even your worst nightmare. And also, it really changed me as a person and as a colleague, because I would have been one of the people sitting there watching. And so it's made me much more empathetic in a weird way in corporate situations. So anyway, I've yet to fully repay that debt to the woman who reached out to me, but I continue to try to do it every day.
Thank you. All right, let's take a
We have
question.
time for one more question,
thank
actually.
you.
The time has come.
On this side, we have a,
Someone have a hand up?
okay.
Over here?
Right here.
Okay, you'll be our last question.
Hi. We've been talking today a lot about the obstacles that we face societally and institutionally, obviously appropriately. But I think certainly many of us unconsciously put obstacles in our own way. And it's easy to say, stop doing that, but I'm wondering how we help each other knock it off.
You're not doing anything wrong. I mean, you are really up against real barriers, and that's the real problem. And I want to say that to you in like no uncertain terms, okay?
Okay.
I totally agree with that. And I also think, look, I'm a huge fan of Sheryl Sandberg's and a bunch of other folks, and I think we can help each other. I can't tell you how many times I'll say to a woman, great presentation, and they'll say, oh, it was nothing. A guy never says that. Just say thank you when someone compliments you. Little things like that. The guy who I helped out because he was apoplectic, that they ignored him in the meeting. After the meeting, I said, well, I won't use his name because it's being taped. I said, that happens to me every day. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay, I'll look out. And I said, could you look out for me? And he goes, absolutely. And, tell colleagues if you're getting interrupted a lot. We can't do this alone. So I would just, don't be afraid to try to help each other. It's nothing embarrassing. I'm the one who, I want to know if I have spinach in my teeth. Like, I think...
Me too.
Yeah. So just be conscious and empathetic and focus on not just ourselves, but our colleagues.
Yeah.
to say I do rely on many of my dear friends to give me either that encouragement or that kick in the pants when I need to get on it on something, or the feedback, and I think that's what we can all do for each other.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to thank all our panelists today. And I want to thank all of you for participating, for your commitment to Columbia College, for your pressing it to be a better institution. It may be the greatest college and the greatest university, the greatest city in the world, and I think it is, but we're not perfect. We're not complete yet. Perfect means complete. I want us to be complete. It's only through the work of you and others that that completion can be achieved. I really appreciate all your contributions today. This was an amazing learning experience for me. Listening to others is the way to learn things. I had to talk several times today, but I didn't have to actually say very much, but I got to listen a lot. I learned a lot, and what I'd like you to do is to communicate this to other people as well, other women, other men. Let's make sure everyone understands these messages and understands these lessons, because that's the route by which Columbia College can become perfect and complete.